Why a little girl was buried alive and smile when they found her. They found her in the cold earth, pale as moonlight, fingers curled like she'd been reaching for something that wasn't there. And she was smiling. Her name was Lisette, 7 years old, blonde curls, eyes so blue they looked like stolen sky, and she should have been dead. They buried her after the fever took her. That's what the doctor said. No pulse, no breath, no warmth. The priest gave the blessing. The family wept. The gravedigger did his job. But 3 days later they heard her singing. From underground. At first they thought it was the wind, then the rain tapping on loose boards. But when they listened closely, the sound was steady, rhythmic, humming. Father Thomas, the village priest, was the first to panic. He ordered them to dig. They tore at the dirt like men possessed, splintered their hands on the frozen earth, ignored the cold tearing at their lungs. And then, a thud. Wood. Her coffin. The gravedigger's shovel slipped, struck it again, and the humming stopped. Silence. For a second they hesitated. Then they wrenched it open. And there she was. Lisette. Her little white dress stained with dirt. Her fingers bruised, but not bleeding. Her cheeks gray, but her eyes open. And she smiled. They pulled her out, wrapped her in cloaks, carried her to the priest's house. "Is she alive?" the mayor whispered, trembling. She's not dead," Father Thomas stammered, "but she's not warm either." "Is it a miracle?" another asked. "Or a curse?" whispered another. Lisette didn't speak. She didn't fight. She just smiled. Her mother sobbed, trying to warm her with blankets, trying to get her to eat. But Lisette didn't eat. She didn't drink. She just stared. Sometimes she hummed, that same quiet, haunting tune, but never a word. And that's when the whispering started. The villagers said she was blessed, or cursed, or neither. "She's a witch's child," some whispered. "They buried her too close to the hanging tree." Maybe the fever wasn't natural. Maybe it was the devil's mark. Her father was a heretic, remember? Always reading strange books. But her father was dead. Gone 2 winters before, crushed under a fallen beam in the mill. And her mother, Marie, was too grief-stricken to defend herself, let alone Lisette. The priest tried to pray over the girl, tried to bless her. But Lisette just stared at him. And when he touched her forehead with holy water, she giggled. A sound like little silver bells. The priest didn't sleep that night. Days passed. Lisette's mother kept her inside. The girl didn't change. She didn't grow weak, didn't shiver, didn't speak. She didn't eat, not a crumb, but never seemed hungry. But always that smile. Sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, Marie would whisper to her, "Lisette, please, are you in pain?" No response. "Lisette, can you hear me? Are you trapped?" The girl's smile never wavered. But Marie swore she saw a tear slip down her cheek, just once. Then the animals began to die. It started with the birds. They fell from the eaves of the church. Pigeons, sparrows, even a hawk found frozen in the village square, its wings spread like it had tried to fly, and failed. Then the cats, strays mostly, hissing, yowling, clawing at the doors, and then collapsing in the frost. Then the cows stopped giving milk, and the dogs stopped barking. The villagers whispered louder now. They blamed Lisette. "Bury her again," someone shouted one night, half drunk on bitter ale. "She wasn't meant to wake." But Father Thomas stopped them. "If we harm her," he warned, "we invite damnation. If she is cursed, it must be lifted, not destroyed." But not even he believed his own words. And he avoided Lisette's house after sunset. Marie begged the priest for help. "Please, Father, she's my child." Father Thomas nodded, but his hands trembled. I will try one last prayer, but if God's will is beyond us—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. He returned that evening with holy water, a silver cross, and a candle blessed at the high altar in the Capitol. Marie tried to light the candle. It wouldn't catch. "Strange," she whispered. "It must be the wind." But there was no wind. Lisette stood by the window, staring at the dark, smiling. The priest tried to speak the rites. "Almighty God, we seek your mercy." Lisette's hum grew louder. "Upon this child who has—" Her humming became a low song. No words, just a tune, like a nursery rhyme played backward. "Lisette, please," Marie sobbed. "Please stop." The priest's voice cracked. His hands shook. The silver cross slipped from his fingers, and Lisette turned, looked at him. Her eyes. They were still blue, but darker now, clouded, like deep water. "Is it him?" she whispered. The priest staggered back. You spoke? Is it him?" she repeated. "Who?" Marie cried. "Who? Lisette?" But Lisette just smiled, and the candle finally caught flame, bright, fierce, but burning with a black smoke that filled the room. The priest ran. He didn't stop until he reached the church. And that night, the wolves came. The howling started just after midnight, low, mournful, like a warning wrapped in darkness. No one in the village slept. Not really. They bolted their doors, shuttered their windows, and whispered prayers into the stale air. But the wolves didn't come for them. They came for the fields. By morning, the crops were flattened. Patches of frost lay like dead scars across the wheat. Half-eaten livestock lay scattered, not devoured, just torn and abandoned. Father Thomas saw the damage and crossed himself 3 times. He spoke to the mayor, begged him to call for a priest from the capital. "We need an exorcist," he whispered. The mayor didn't argue, but by noon the messenger they sent didn't return. Lisette's mother kept her inside, curtains drawn, door bolted. But the house felt colder now, a damp, creeping chill that seemed to cling to the walls. Marie whispered to her daughter, begging her to speak. "Lisette, who is he? Who are you talking to?" But Lisette just smiled. The birds stopped singing. The animals refused to leave their pens. And the villagers grew restless. Marie tried to take Lisette to the church. The priest opened the door just enough to look through. But when he saw the girl, that same strange smile, he slammed it shut. "I can't help you. God have mercy. I can't help you." Marie pounded on the door until her hands were raw. But the priest didn't answer. She staggered home, clutching Lisette close, feeling the girl's cold breath against her neck. That night, the snow came. Not a gentle dusting. A thick, violent storm burying the village in hours. Trees groaned under the weight. Roofs sagged, and the howling started again, louder, closer. Marie tried to keep the fire going, but the logs burned too fast. The candles wouldn't stay lit. The cold slipped in through cracks in the walls, slithered around her feet, numbed her fingers. Lisette stood by the window, staring at the white world beyond. "Please sit," Marie whispered. "Please rest. Please tell me what's happening." But Lisette didn't move. Then, in the silence, she spoke. "He's looking for me." Marie's heart stopped. "Who? Who's looking for you?" Lisette's eyes didn't turn from the window. "He always finds me." Marie grabbed her, spun her around, gripped her thin shoulders. "Lisette! Who is he?" The little girl's smile never changed. But her voice, it seemed distant, like someone else speaking through her. "The one who follows, the one who whispers, the one I tricked." Marie's hands trembled. "Tricked? Tricked how?" "I didn't answer," Lisette said. "I didn't open the door." Marie's breath came fast, sharp. He came to the door? He knocked? But Lisette shook her head. Not like that. He knocks inside. A shadow moved outside the window. Marie's grip tightened. What does he want? Me, Lisette whispered. But I'm not his. The wind howled. The shutters rattled. Marie stared at her daughter, 1,000 desperate thoughts clawing at her mind. If you're not his, then whose are you? For the first time, the smile faded from Lisette's face. I don't know. A sudden crash shattered the silence. The back window broke, snow spilling into the kitchen. Marie screamed, grabbed Lisette, dragged her into the back room. She slammed the door, locked it, dragged a chair against it. The wind grew louder, a low, pulsing howl that seemed to circle the house. Marie whispered prayers, half forgotten, jumbled. Her fingers traced the silver cross around her neck, but the metal felt cold, lifeless. Lisette stood still, her head tilted, as though listening to something just beyond the walls. Marie tried to cover her ears, tried to shut out the sound. And then Lisette whispered again, "You can't shut him out!" "Stop it!" Marie screamed. "Stop it, please!" But Lisette just stared. "He doesn't leave! He waits!" The wind shifted. The howl turned into a low, rhythmic chant, not in words, but in pressure, a feeling in the bones. Marie closed her eyes, buried her face against her knees, sobbed. She felt Lisette's cold hand on her shoulder. "It's okay, Mama. He can't have me. I didn't answer." Marie looked up. But the others?" Lisette's voice softened, almost sad. They did. The wind outside seemed to scream, but it wasn't just wind, it was voices, faint, distant, whispering, crying, calling. Marie tried to pray, tried to remember the words, but they slipped away, scattered like ash. Lisette's voice became a faint hum again, that same quiet, haunting tune. But now, there were others, echoing, twisting around her voice. The storm raged on, but the room grew quiet, too quiet. Marie didn't know when she fell asleep, only that the cold finally faded, the wind slowed, and she was alone on the floor, clutching an empty blanket. Lisette was gone. Marie's scream tore through the empty house. Marie's scream shattered the morning calm. Neighbors rushed to her door, boots crunching through fresh snow. They found her clawing at the walls, her hands bloodied, her eyes wild. "She's gone," Marie sobbed. They took my Lisette." The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. Some whispered of madness. Others murmured of the wolves, the snow, the wind that never seemed to die down. Father Thomas arrived, breathless, his face pale beneath the frost. He grabbed Marie by the shoulders. "Marie, listen to me. Did you see her leave? Did anyone take her?" Marie's head shook violently. She was here. She was here. And then the wind. And... "She is gone, Father," one of the men muttered, crossing himself. "She should never have been brought back. We all know it." The priest's jaw clenched. "Enough! No more talk of curses." But his voice lacked conviction. Marie's hands trembled. "Father, please. She said he was looking for her. She said, he waits." Father Thomas's heart twisted. He tried to offer comfort, but all he had were hollow words. "We will find her, Marie. We will search." But he knew. Deep down, he knew. They wouldn't find Lisette. Not alive. The village scattered in search. Men with lanterns trudged through snow-laden woods, called her name until their voices were hoarse. The fields lay dead, the trees bent beneath the weight of frost, and the river froze in place. a silent silver scar across the land. No one found tracks, no footprints, no sign of struggle. Just silence. The dogs wouldn't leave their pens. The birds stayed hidden. Marie wandered the village square, barefoot in the snow, clutching a scrap of Lisette's blanket. Her lips moved, whispering the girl's name over and over. She was here. She was here. The wind seemed to carry her voice, bending it, twisting it into a distant echo. Some of the villagers begged Father Thomas to perform a blessing, to drive away whatever darkness had settled over them. But the priest stared at his trembling hands, whispered his own prayers, and couldn't bring himself to face the altar. Because he felt it too. That weight, that cold, that endless listening silence. And he was afraid that if he spoke, something else might answer. 3 days passed. On the 4th morning, the snow began to melt. The village paths turned to slush. The roofs dripped. For a moment, hope dared to flicker. But as the snow pulled away, the fields remained dead, gray, wilted. The livestock staggered, weak, ribs showing beneath thin coats of fur. The villagers spoke in whispers now. No one went out after sunset. Doors were locked, windows sealed. Children were told not to sing, not to laugh too loud. Quiet, their mothers whispered. Quiet is safe. But the quiet never felt safe. It felt like a weight pressing down on the roofs, watching through the frosted glass, crawling beneath the door frames. Marie's house stood empty. She wandered the chapel now, muttering prayers, pressing her forehead to the cold stone floor. She's not gone. She can't be gone. I would know. I would know. Father Thomas tried to comfort her, but he could barely comfort himself. He had begun hearing whispers in his sleep. Faint. Software. The same 3 words again and again. Is it him? He didn't understand. But then, on the 5th night, he did. Because Lisette came back. The priest heard the knock just before dawn. 3 soft taps, not frantic, not loud, just gentle. He hesitated, staring at the heavy wooden door, the frosted glass, the weak light creeping over the horizon. Another knock, 3 times, patient. He rose, candle in hand, fingers trembling. He pulled the latch, opened the door. And there she was, Lisette. Her white dress was clean, no dirt, no snow. Her hair shone like silver in the dim light. And her eyes, blue, deep, unblinking. Lisette, Father Thomas whispered. She didn't speak, just stood there, smiling. Where were you? Silence. Lisette. Please. The girl tilted her head, the smile never fading. Did he find you? The priest stammered. Her smile widened, just a fraction. The priest's knees weakened. He stepped back. Are you Lisette? The smile remained, but her eyes seemed to darken, a shadow passing through them. Then, she stepped inside. The air grew heavy. The candle flickered wildly, its flame twisting, stretching toward her. Father Thomas tried to speak, but his voice stuck in his throat. His hands went cold. His breath shuddered. Lisette walked past him, quiet as snow, her feet leaving no marks on the stone floor. She moved toward the altar. The priest's voice broke free, desperate, pleading. Lisette! Child, please tell me. Are you alone? Her back was to him, still, perfectly still. Then she turned, and he saw her smile shift. Not warm, not innocent. Hollow. I never was. The candle's flame flared, then died. Darkness swallowed the chapel. Father Thomas tried to scream, tried to call for help, but his voice was gone, lost in the quiet. By morning, The chapel doors hung open. The snow had melted, leaving wet stones slick with frost. Marie came, breathless, hope burning in her chest. She saw the empty chapel. The silver cross lay twisted on the floor. They searched for Father Thomas for 2 days, but there was nothing to find. No footprints, no tracks, no sign of struggle. Just the twisted silver cross on the chapel floor and the cold, empty silence that seemed to cling to the walls. Marie didn't leave the chapel. She stayed by the altar, whispering prayers to a God who didn't seem to hear. Her eyes were swollen, her voice a faint rasp. "She's here. She's here. I know she's here." But Lisette was gone. Again. Some of the villagers stopped coming to the chapel altogether. They said it was cursed, that the priest had brought something terrible down on them by trying to bless the child. Others whispered that Marie was to blame, that her grief had turned to madness, that she'd angered God with her desperate prayers. But no one said it to her face. And no one went near her after dark. The wind had returned, sharp and biting. It whispered through the eaves, through the cracks in the shutters. Always the same low hum, rising and falling like a breath too close to the ear. And the wolves came back. Not in packs, just one at a time. Circling the village at the edge of the woods, their eyes bright in the moonlight, watching. The mayor tried to rally the villagers. "We must be strong. We must not give in to fear." But even he spoke with shaking hands, his voice thin against the cold. The cows gave no milk, the chickens laid no eggs, and the silence seemed to seep into the soil, spreading like a sickness. The villagers avoided each other now. They walked quickly, heads down, eyes on the ground. No one sang, no one laughed. And Marie, poor broken Marie, whispered to the empty air, "Lisette, please, come home." But the air never answered. On the third night, a figure was seen in the graveyard. Old Henri, the grave digger, swore he saw a child standing among the stones. He stumbled toward her, calling out, waving his lantern. But the figure didn't move, and when he reached it, his lantern flickered, and she was gone. Only a faint smell of snow and something sweet lingered in the air. Henri told the mayor, told the villagers, but most of them didn't believe him, or didn't want to. "It was the mist," they said. "The fog plays tricks." But some of them began leaving candles on their windowsills at night. "Light keeps it away," an old woman whispered to her grandson. "Light makes it forget." The boy didn't understand, but he didn't argue, and the candles burned, flickering in the darkness. Marie grew weaker. She barely ate. Her hair thinned, her cheeks hollowed. But she never left the chapel. Even at night, when the wind howled, when the shadows seemed to shift in the corners, she stayed. One night, as the snow fell like a silver curtain outside, she heard it. A faint hum. Her breath caught. "Lisette," she whispered. No answer. She stood, her legs trembling, her fingers gripping the edge of the altar. "Lisette, is that you?" The hum grew louder. It was coming from the front of the chapel, from the open door. Marie staggered toward it, her eyes wide, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Lisette!" The hum became a song. That same haunting, wordless tune she had heard her daughter sing 1,000 times. But now it was louder. And there were other voices. Voices that rose and fell in strange, twisted harmony. Deep and low, thin and sharp. A chorus that wasn't meant for human ears. Marie fell to her knees. "Please, please bring her back. Please." The wind surged, the snow spiraled through the open door, and for a moment, she saw a shape. Small, pale, standing just beyond the threshold. "Lisette!" she screamed. But the shape didn't move, and the wind swallowed it. Marie collapsed, her sobs lost in the cold. The next morning, the villagers found her lying in the snow outside the chapel, shivering, her lips blue, her fingers curled like claws. They brought her inside, laid her by the fire, tried to warm her, but she wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat, wouldn't move. The mayor leaned over her, whispered her name. Marie. Please. What happened? Her lips moved barely. He won't let her go, she whispered. He won't let her go. Who? Who won't let her go? Her eyes fixed on the window, wide and empty. The one who whispers. The one who knocks. The one who waits. The villagers whispered among themselves. They wanted to leave, to run. But where would they go? The snow had buried the road. The river was frozen. And the forest. The forest seemed to lean closer with every sunrise, the trees bending toward the village, their bare branches clawing at the sky. The wolves didn't howl anymore, but their eyes still watched. And in the darkness, a faint humming seemed to float on the wind. That night, 3 families packed their things. They didn't tell anyone. They just left. But by morning, their houses stood dark. Their doors swung open in the wind. Their beds were empty. The snow around their homes was untouched. No tracks. No prints. It was as though they had never been there. By the next morning, the village was a shadow of itself. Empty homes. Dark windows. Silence thick enough to taste. Those who remained barely spoke, moving like ghosts through the frost-bitten streets, eyes sunken, breath misting in the cold air. Marie lay curled beneath a thin blanket in the chapel, her eyes staring at nothing. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. The fire beside her crackled weakly, barely enough to chase away the chill. The mayor tried to rally the remaining villagers. We must stay together. We must not give in to fear. But even he spoke in whispers, his hands shaking beneath his cloak. We should leave, whispered old Henri, the gravedigger. All of us, while we still can. But no one moved. The roads were buried in snow. The forest pressed closer, branches heavy with frost. And the river had frozen solid, a mirror of pale silver beneath the gray sky. I saw her again, Henri whispered, staring into his mug of watered-down ale. Last night, by the graves, just standing, watching. Don't speak of it, the baker hissed, crossing herself. Don't you see? The more we talk, the closer it gets. Closer? Someone laughed, a wild, desperate sound. It's already here. It's in the walls. It's in the air. They fell silent, listening, always listening, because the quiet wasn't empty. It was thick, heavy, like a hand pressing down on their ears, and Marie, lying in the chapel, whispered to the shadows, Lisette, Lisette, come back. But the shadows didn't answer. That night, the wind rose again. But it wasn't like the other storms. This wind didn't howl. It murmured, low, whispering, scraping against the walls like 100 faint, desperate voices. Marie tried to sit up, her thin hands clutching the edge of the blanket. The fire flickered, shrank, then flared with a sickly green glow. The door rattled. Marie's breath caught. Lisette, she whispered. The wind pressed harder, and the whispering grew louder, louder than the wind, like a choir trapped behind thin glass, begging to be let out. Marie's fingers dug into the blanket. Please, please, bring her back. The door swung open. Snow spiraled in, twisting like smoke, and through the swirling frost Marie saw her, Lisette, standing in the doorway, pale, perfect, her blue eyes fixed on her mother, the same small smile on her lips. Lisette, Marie sobbed, her voice breaking. Lisette, my baby, please, please come inside. The girl didn't move. Marie struggled to her feet, her legs weak, her vision swimming. "Lisette, please, please." The snow twisted, the wind howled, and the girl's figure seemed to shimmer, to fade in and out of focus. "Who is with you?" Marie cried. "Who is keeping you?" Lisette's smile didn't change, but behind her, shapes began to appear. Dark, thin, twisting shapes, taller than the doorframe, bending, shifting like smoke. The whispers grew louder, words twisted, tangled, impossible to understand. Marie staggered back, her hand reaching for the silver cross on the altar. "Please, God, please." The shadows leaned forward, and Lisette stepped inside. The door slammed shut. The wind fell silent, and Marie fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Lisette, Lisette, please, please say something, please." The girl's eyes turned toward her, deep, blue, empty. "Why did you leave me?" Marie sobbed. "Who is he? Who is keeping you?" Lisette's head tilted. Her smile faded, just a little. "Is it him?" she whispered. Marie's blood turned to ice. Who, Lisette?" "Is it him?" Lisette repeated, her voice thin, distant. "The one who waits, the one who knocks, the one who never leaves." Marie shook her head, her nails digging into her palms. "Please, please, baby, come back to me. Please." "He's here," Lisette whispered. "He's always here." And the fire went out. Marie screamed, but the darkness swallowed the sound. Morning came slow and gray. The villagers found the chapel doors hanging open, snow drifting across the pews. Marie was gone, not dead, not hiding, gone, like she had never been there. The mayor stared, his breath fogging in the cold air. She couldn't have just left, not in this snow. But the villagers didn't listen, because on the steps of the chapel, drawn in the frost, were words. "She is with him now." They ran. Most of them. Bundled whatever they could carry, pulled their children from their beds, bolted their doors. But by noon, the wind was howling again, and the village square stood empty. Henri stayed. He stayed because he was too old to run, because he had seen death enough times to know there were worse things. But now he wondered if this was one of them. He sat in his cottage, his lantern burning low, the shadows pressing close against the frosted windows. He didn't look outside, he didn't listen, but he heard it anyway. The humming, that same soft, eerie tune, wordless, endless, wrapping around the wind, twisting through the cracks in the walls. His hands trembled. His breath came quick, sharp. "She's gone," he whispered. "She's gone." But the humming didn't stop. And when his lantern flickered, he saw a shape in the glass, small, pale. A girl with blue eyes, standing just beyond the frost, watching. Henri didn't sleep. He couldn't. The lantern's glow grew weaker, flickering with each gust of wind. His breath misted in the cold air, his old bones aching beneath the thin blanket. But he didn't dare look at the window again, because he knew she was still there. That faint, pale face just beyond the frost, staring, smiling. He tried to pray. The words fumbled, half-remembered, slipping through his chattering teeth. "Lord, Lord, protect me, guide me, deliver me." But the shadows seemed to lean closer. The wind twisted his words, bending them into something else. And the humming never stopped. Low, sweet, familiar. Henri knew that song. The children had sung it in the square every spring. A little melody of joy, of laughter. But now, it was wrong. Slower, colder, like a lullaby for an empty cradle. The lantern's flame guttered, once, twice, and then it died. The darkness rushed in, thick and heavy, pressing against his eyes. His heart pounded, his fingers clawed at the table, his breath came fast and thin. But the humming didn't stop. Henri squeezed his eyes shut. "Go away. Please. Please go away." The wind hissed against the window. The cold bit at his face, his hands. And then, silence, not calm. Heavy. Suffocating. A silence that pressed on his ears, that filled his lungs, that wrapped around his throat. "Don't look," he whispered to himself. Don't look." But his eyes opened. And she was there. Lisette. Standing in the darkness, her pale blue eyes fixed on him, her lips curled in that same small smile. "Please," Henri choked. "Please." She stepped forward, not walking, just moving, closer. Her eyes didn't blink. Her face didn't change. "Lisette," Henri sobbed. Why are you here?" Her voice was a whisper, soft as falling snow. "Is it him?" Henri's blood ran cold. Who, child? Who is it?" Lisette tilted her head. "He's waiting." No, please. Please go." Her smile didn't fade. "You left me. All of you left me." Henri's breath caught. We tried to help. We dug you out. We brought you home." "You buried me," she whispered. "And then you buried yourselves." The wind rose, a low, shivering moan that seemed to twist through the walls. Henri fell to his knees, clutching the edge of the table. "God, please, please forgive me. Please." "He doesn't forgive," Lisette whispered. "He remembers." Her shadow stretched, twisted, darkening, spilling across the floor like ink. And then the window shattered. Cold air rushed in, tearing at the room. Snow spun, swirling around Henri, cutting at his face, his hands. The darkness wrapped around his legs, pulled at his chest, and in that howling cold, he heard them. The voices, faint, distant, crying, calling. "Help me, please. Where are you? Mama! I can't see, it's so cold." He's here. Don't let him take me." Faces pressed against the frost on the broken window, twisted, pale, staring with empty eyes. Henri screamed, but his voice was lost in the wind. The darkness swallowed him, freezing his lungs, crushing his chest, pulling him down. And the last thing he saw was Lisette's face, smiling. Morning came in silence. The village square stood empty. The snow had stopped, the wind had faded, and the cottages were dark. No smoke rose from the chimneys, no voices called across the frozen streets, only the soft, faint sound of humming, drifting on the still, icy air. The mayor's house was empty. The chapel's doors hung open, snow spilling across the altar. The tavern lay silent, the mugs frozen to the tables. Not a single footprint marked the fresh snow. Not a single breath fogged the cold air. The village of Montclair was gone. But it didn't feel abandoned. It felt paused, like something was still watching, like something was waiting. They came to search weeks later. Riders from the capital, merchants who had heard strange stories of wolves and whispers, of a priest who vanished and a village that had gone silent. They found nothing but snow and empty homes. No bodies, no blood, just stillness. The search party gathered in the square, shivering, their breaths misting in the pale morning light. "What happened here?" one of them whispered. No one answered. A young scout, barely 16, wandered to the edge of the village, his boots crunching in the snow. He reached the chapel steps, peered inside. The altar stood cold and bare, but as he turned to leave, something caught his eye. Words, faint, drawn in the frost on the glass window. "He is here." The scout's heart skipped. He stepped back, slipped on the ice, scrambled to his feet. "Something's wrong," he shouted. "We need to leave. Now!" The riders didn't argue. They turned, spurred their horses, raced down the snow-covered road, and as they vanished over the hill, the wind began to hum. Low, soft until they reached the next village, a quiet, snow-dusted hamlet called Briarwood. They burst into the inn, faces pale, hands shaking. The fire roared in the hearth, but none of them felt warm. "There's nothing left. Nothing," one whispered, his voice cracking. "An empty village. Just empty." The innkeeper, an old woman with kind eyes, brought them ale, tried to calm them. Lost in the snow, perhaps, or fled the cold? No. The youngest scout shook his head, eyes wide. They didn't flee. They vanished. All of them. The innkeeper's smile faltered. Perhaps the plague... "No bodies," the scout whispered. "No sickness. Just quiet." The room fell silent. The fire crackled, casting long shadows across the walls. And then the wind outside picked up, a low, steady hum brushing against the shutters. One of the riders crossed himself. Another muttered a prayer. The youngest scout stared into his mug, his fingers trembling. "I saw something. In the chapel. Words. In the frost." "What words?" the innkeeper asked, her voice thin. "He is here." The innkeeper's hand tightened on the edge of the table. "You're certain?" The boy nodded. "We shouldn't have gone. We shouldn't have stayed so long." The wind seemed to scratch against the windows, a faint, rhythmic whisper. "Enough!" the captain of the riders barked, slamming his mug down. "We're done with ghost stories. We'll sleep tonight, and tomorrow we ride for the capital. Let the scholars explain this madness." But none of them slept, because the wind wouldn't stop. And by morning, the scout was gone. They searched Briarwood for hours, called his name, tore through the snowdrifts and the woods, but there was no trace, no tracks, no blood, no signs of struggle. Just an empty bed, the sheets pulled back neatly, his boots still beside the door. The innkeeper crossed herself, whispered prayers in a language the riders didn't understand. The captain ordered the men to saddle their horses, but one of them refused. "We shouldn't go that way," he whispered, staring at the snow-covered road. "Not back that way." "We have no choice," the captain growled. The rider's hand shook. "But if we go, it'll follow." "Madness," the captain snapped. "You're all seeing shadows." But the rider wouldn't move. And when the others rode out, he stayed behind, watching them disappear over the ridge, his breath misting in the cold air. The wind whispered through the trees, and he heard it, a faint, sweet hum. The riders never reached the capital. 3 weeks later, a trader traveling the mountain pass found their horses, wandering alone, thin and shivering, saddles empty. No one ever saw the riders again. But a month later, a merchant's caravan passed through Briarwood, and the inn was dark. Empty. Not a chair overturned. Not a dish out of place. Just still, like the village of Montclair. Like the chapel in the snow. Like a painting frozen in time. And the wind carried a faint, distant melody. The story spread, not as news, not as fact, but as whispers. Traders spoke of cursed villages, travelers warned of empty roads, farmers marked their doors with chalk, drew symbols in the snow, hung charms of iron and silver from their windows. "Keep the light burning," they whispered to their children. "Don't sing after dark. Don't answer if you hear a voice." In the capital, scholars scoffed. Superstition, folk tales, panic. But the stories didn't stop. They spread. From village to village, town to town. Names changed, details shifted. Sometimes it was a woman who hummed in the dark. Sometimes it was a child with black eyes. Sometimes it was a whisper that followed travelers, calling them by name. But always the same message. He is here. And then the letters began, scratched on thin parchment, delivered with no sender, no mark. Just a single line, always the same. Don't listen, don't look, don't answer. Some were found nailed to doors. Others slipped beneath shutters. A few were found in locked rooms, always written in the same shaking hand. Some were burned, others were buried. But no one who received one forgot. Because they all began to hear it. The hum, low, software familiar, like a nursery song. The village of Briarwood lay empty now. The inn, dark, the fire, cold, and the snow stretched across the rooftops, untouched. But if you stood at the edge of the square, if you listened past the wind, you could hear it. A faint, sweet tune, winding through the empty streets. And at night, shadows seemed to move behind the frosted glass, faces pressed against the windows, pale, watching. The next village to the south began to whisper of strange sounds, of children who hummed in their sleep, of a woman who walked the road at dusk, smiling but never speaking. The mayor wrote a letter to the capital, begged for help, warned of something terrible. No one came, because the letter never arrived. And far beyond the snow, in the warmth of the capital's tall towers, the scholars wrote it off as legend. A tale for the fearful, a story for children, ghosts and whispers. But sometimes, even the educated whispered, because one of them, a young scribe, found a note on his desk one morning. Thin parchment, no signature. Don't listen, don't look, don't answer. He laughed, called it a prank, until he walked home that night and heard a faint, sweet hum behind him. And when he looked back, a small, pale figure stood in the fog, watching, smiling. The scribe didn't scream. He couldn't. His throat locked, his breath caught, his feet frozen in the wet, misty cobblestones. The pale figure stood just at the edge of the fog, her small face framed by damp curls, her eyes two dark, endless pools. And she smiled. "Who are you?" he whispered, though he didn't mean to speak. His voice felt small, swallowed by the mist. The girl didn't answer, just tilted her head, her lips still curled in that quiet, gentle smile. The hum rose around him, twisting through the mist, soft and sweet, like a lullaby that shouldn't be there. The scribe's heart raced, his legs trembled. Stay back. But she didn't move. The fog thickened, closing in, pressing cold fingers against his cheeks. The shadows seemed to bend, to twist, to reach for him. He turned, ran, his boots slipping on the slick stones, his breath hot against the freezing air. The hum followed him, rising and falling, a tune with no words but too many voices. He didn't look back, but he felt her, felt that cold, empty smile, felt her eyes watching the back of his neck. He stumbled through the gate, crashed into a cart, shouted for the guards. But the guards weren't there. The square stood empty. No lanterns, no voices, no footsteps but his own. "Help! Someone, please!" His voice echoed, swallowed by the mist. Then, silence. The hum stopped. The air grew still. He turned, panting, his chest burning, his hands numb. Nothing. No pale figure, no smiling face, no shadows, just cold, wet mist creeping around the corners. He didn't go home that night, didn't dare. He stumbled through the dark streets until he found the candlelit glow of an inn, a crowded, noisy place filled with drunken laughter and the crackling of a fire. He stayed in the corner, trembling, his eyes never leaving the door. But she didn't come. By morning, he told himself it was a dream, a nightmare born of too much wine, too many stories. But his hands still trembled. His breath still caught in his chest. And when he returned to the scriptorium, the quiet candle-lit hall where he worked, he found a letter on his desk. Thin parchment, no seal, no name. Don't listen, don't look, don't answer. His blood turned cold. He grabbed the letter, crushed it in his fist, threw it into the fire, watched it curl, blacken, turn to ash. But the words burned into his mind. Don't listen, don't look, don't answer. He told the scholars. They laughed, called him foolish, superstitious. But by nightfall, one of them didn't return home. Then another. The scribe heard the whispers. A runaway, a scandal, a jealous lover. But he knew, and he wasn't the only one. The whispers spread. The wind carried them, twisting through the alleys, curling through the high towers of the capital, stories of a pale girl, of an empty village, of a song that followed travelers in the mist. Letters began to arrive at the scriptorium, more of them, some addressed to no one, some marked with trembling hands, all with the same warning. The scholars ignored them, burned them, called them pranks. But the disappearances didn't stop. The scribe watched his colleagues speak in hushed tones, their faces pale, their laughter forced. He saw them rush home at dusk, slamming their doors, bolting their windows. But the wind didn't care, and the hum grew louder. One night, as the scribe lay in his narrow bed, listening to the wind scratch against the shutters, he heard it again. That faint, sweet tune, low, software humming. His chest tightened. He pulled the blankets over his head, squeezed his eyes shut, whispered prayers he had forgotten for years. But the hum didn't stop. It was inside, not outside the window, not in the street. Inside. Don't listen, he whispered, pressing his hands against his ears. The wind rose, howled against the shutters, and he heard it. Her voice, a whisper. Is it him? His heart raced. His breath came fast, shallow. No, please. Please. The blanket seemed to grow heavy, pressing against his chest. The darkness twisted around him, cold fingers brushing against his cheeks. Don't look. Don't look. His eyes opened, and she was there, standing at the foot of his bed. Pale, silent, smiling, he screamed. But the darkness swallowed the sound. Morning came with gray light, cold mist clinging to the streets. The innkeeper found his door locked, no sound from within. She knocked. No answer. Pushed the door. It swung open. The bed was empty. The blankets neatly folded. His boots beside the door. But on the window, drawn in the frost, were 3 words. He is here. The innkeeper tried to tell the guards, but they laughed it off. Another drunk scribe, they said. Another young fool who ran off with a lover. But the whispers didn't stop. The letters kept arriving, thin parchment. No names. The scholars burned them, the guards ignored them. But they spread. And as the capital's streets grew cold, as the mist thickened in the alleyways, a strange stillness settled over the city. A silence that felt too heavy. A wind that whispered with too many voices. And a faint, sweet tune that seemed to hum in the distance. Always just out of sight, always just beyond the fog. The capital didn't fall silent all at once. It happened in pieces. First, the market square seemed quieter. The merchants spoke in low voices. The laughter that once filled the air now seemed forced, nervous. Then the church bells rang less often. The priests muttered their prayers behind closed doors, their voices thin, their eyes sunken. The wind seemed to cling to the streets, a low, constant hum brushing against the rooftops. Sometimes in the mist, shadows seemed to move, faint, thin shapes slipping between the alleys, gone in an instant. But the letters didn't stop. More of them, left on doorsteps, slipped beneath shutters, even found beneath pillows. All the same thin parchment. No names, just the warning. Don't listen. Don't look. Don't answer. Some laughed. Some cursed. But none of them burned the letters now. They folded them, hid them, carried them like charms. Because people were disappearing. Not many, not all at once, but enough. A merchant who closed his stall at dusk and never returned home. A baker's daughter who sang in the square one day and was gone the next. A guard who laughed at the stories, until he was found shivering beneath his own bed, his hair gone white. They whispered of ghosts, of curses, of a pale girl who wandered the streets at dawn, her bare feet leaving no marks in the frost. The scholars tried to silence the rumors, calling them panic, madness, but they began locking their doors at night. One by one, the street lamps were left unlit. One by one, the windows grew dark. The scribe's empty room became a story, a place no one stayed, a place where the wind seemed to whisper through the shutters even when they were sealed. The innkeeper stopped renting it, stopped cleaning it, stopped going near it. But sometimes, in the dead of night, she heard a faint, sweet hum from behind the door. The young priest who had replaced Father Thomas in Montclair came to the capital, seeking help, seeking answers. But the scholars offered him only polite smiles and empty words. An isolated incident, they told him. A superstitious village caught in fear. But they're gone, he whispered. All of them. Perhaps they fled, a gray-haired scholar murmured. Perhaps the winter drove them out. Fled where? The priest whispered. There are no tracks, no bodies, no signs. Madness can spread like fever, another scholar said, pouring wine. And fear is the most contagious of all. But the priest didn't touch the wine. His eyes were hollow, his fingers trembling beneath his robes. She spoke to me, he whispered. She smiled. She said, "He is here." The room fell quiet. The scholars exchanged uneasy glances. But they didn't believe him. Not until the letters began arriving in the capital. Not until the humming spread beyond the wind. The letters reached the palace next. Slipped beneath the grand doors, laid on the silver trays in the dining hall, found folded beneath the silk pillows in the royal chambers. Don't listen. Don't look. Don't answer. The guards laughed at first, burned the letters, sealed the doors. But the letters came back, more of them. Hundreds. Scattered across the marble floors, stuck to the frozen windows, hung from the chandeliers like ghostly banners. The queen demanded answers. The chancellor ordered the guards doubled. The scholars were summoned, told to explain. But all they had were stories. And in the dark, the humming never stopped. One night, the queen's youngest son woke screaming. "They're here!" he cried, clawing at the sheets. "They're in the walls! They're watching!" The guards rushed in, but the prince wouldn't stop screaming. His fingers dug into his own arms. His breath came fast, sharp. "I heard them," he sobbed. "I heard them calling. They want me! They want me!" The queen wept, holding him close, whispering prayers, calling for the priest. But the priest wouldn't come, because he was gone. And on his empty bed, drawn in the frost of the window, were 3 words. "He is here." The queen locked the palace doors. The chancellor ordered the scholars to find the truth. The city's gates were barred. No one left. No one entered. But the wind still whispered through the alleys. The shadows still seemed to bend beneath the lanterns. And the hum grew louder. The young prince fell silent. He didn't speak, didn't eat. His eyes stared at the ceiling, wide and empty. "Speak to me," the queen begged. "Please, please, my son." But he only whispered one thing. "Is it him?" The scholars whispered among themselves. Some argued it was plague. Some blamed a curse. Some called for fire, for purification, for holy rites. But the wind didn't care, and one by one they too began to disappear. A scribe found a letter on his desk, the ink still wet. "Don't answer." He fled that night, but his horse returned without him. A chambermaid saw a pale girl smiling in the hall, but no one else saw her. The palace grew cold. The fires burned low. The mirrors frosted over, and the corridors seemed too quiet. Then one night, the humming stopped. Not faded, stopped. A silence so thick, it seemed to press against the walls, wrap around the pillars, smother the crackling of the fire. The queen woke in her chamber, her breath misting in the cold air. She reached for her son, but his bed was empty. Where is he?" she whispered. And then she saw it, a shape in the doorway, small, pale, smiling. "Lisette," the queen whispered, though she didn't know why she spoke the name. The girl's smile didn't change, but a shadow seemed to stretch behind her, rising, twisting, darkening the chamber. The queen tried to scream, but the darkness swallowed the sound. Morning came, gray and cold. The guards burst into the queen's chamber. The bed was empty, the windows frosted, and on the mirror, drawn in a child's hand, "He is here." The capital was dying. Not in flames, not in chaos, in silence. The streets grew empty, the markets closed. The lamps flickered one by one and went dark. And the wind never stopped, that cold, whispering wind that seemed to crawl beneath the doors to press against the windows. And always, that faint, sweet hum. The scholars stopped meeting. Their halls stood empty, the great candles cold. No one studied the letters anymore. No one spoke of the warnings, because they were gone. Only a handful remained, the chancellor, a few guards, and the queen's handmaid. They walked the silent corridors, their footsteps lost in the heavy air. The queen's chamber was sealed, the doors barred. No one spoke her name. No one spoke at all. Because now, they heard it. The hum. Not just in the wind, but in the walls, in the stones beneath their feet. It rose and fell, a quiet, gentle tune, twisting through the shadows. One by one, the guards vanished. The chancellor locked himself in the great hall, clutching a silver cross, muttering to himself, "She's here. She's still here. They're all here." But the fire beside him burned low, its light fading, swallowed by the cold. The handmaid whispered to herself, pacing the empty corridors. Her fingers bled from clawing at the windows. Her voice cracked from crying out. "Please, please, someone, anyone, help me." But no one came. Because there was no one left. The city outside stood empty. No voices, no footsteps. The market stalls stood bare, the snow-covered rooftops quiet. And through the mist, shapes seemed to move. Faint, pale shadows slipping between the alleys, faces pressed against the frosted glass, watching, smiling. The wind twisted through the empty streets, that same sweet, endless hum. And the darkness leaned closer. The handmaid tried to leave. She grabbed a cloak, stumbled through the frozen corridors, her breath misting in the air. The doors stood open, the wind pulling at her, whispering in her ears. She ran, down the grand staircase, through the silent hall, out into the courtyard. The snow was fresh, untouched. No tracks, no sound but the wind. She ran faster, her feet slipping, her breath coming sharp and desperate. "Help me! Someone! Please!" Her voice vanished in the mist. The gates loomed before her, twisted iron wrapped in frost, but the path seemed longer. The snow stretched out, endless, swallowing her steps, and in the mist she saw them. Figures, standing still, watching, not moving, not speaking, just staring with pale, empty eyes. The hum rose, a chorus now, a sweet, twisting song that wrapped around her, pressed against her ears. "No, no, please!" Her legs buckled. Her hands clawed at the air, and she saw her, Lisette, standing in the snow, pale, perfect, smiling. "Lisette," the handmaid whispered. "Please, please help me." The girl's smile widened, just a little, and the wind whispered, wrapping around her like a cold, gentle touch. "He is here." The darkness surged forward, and the hum swallowed her scream. The capital stood empty, the streets silent, the gates frozen, the great towers dark and still. No one left to speak, no one left to listen, no one left to see. Just the mist twisting through the alleys, just the snow settling over the rooftops, just the wind humming that soft, sweet tune. And the faces, pale and faint, pressed against the frosted glass, watching, waiting. The story didn't die. Not completely. The traders who came from the south spoke of an empty city, a place of frozen streets and silent towers. They said the wind there sang. They said the shadows moved. They said if you listened too closely, you'd hear her, a little girl, singing, smiling. But no one believed them. Not at first, until the letters began. Thin parchment, no name, no seal. Don't listen, don't look, don't answer. They spread from village to village, town to town, whispered warnings carried by trembling hands. In the mountain villages, they spoke of a pale child seen wandering the woods at dusk, her eyes blue, her lips smiling. In the coastal towns, they whispered of ships that vanished in the mist, their sails torn, their cabins empty. And in the crowded markets of the southern cities, children sang a strange, sweet tune, a melody no one taught them. But they sang it anyway, and those who listened too closely sometimes didn't come home. The wind never stops. Not in the mountains, not by the rivers, not in the quiet villages huddled beneath the gray sky, and always beneath it, that faint, sweet hum. Sometimes, in the dead of night, someone will look out their window and see her, small, pale, smiling, standing just beyond the frost, watching, waiting, and sometimes they see something behind her, a shape that bends, that twists, that stretches, a shadow that doesn't belong. And in the morning, the window is empty, but drawn in the frost, always the same 3 words. He is here. If you ever hear a sweet, wordless tune in the mist, if you ever see a child standing alone in the cold, if you ever find a letter with no name, no seal, no sender, remember, don't listen, don't look, don't answer, because she is here, and he never left. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and comment below for more themed history you all want to hear from Uncle Luke Tells Story.